At 6:23 a.m. on June 6, 1944, Sergeant Jack Williams sat in the driver's seat of a Sherman tank that looked like no other tank on the D-Day beaches. Bolted to the front was a rotating drum studded with 43 heavy chains, each one designed to beat the ground ahead with enough force to detonate buried mines. The other tank commanders called it a circus act. They called it Hobart's Folly. They said a real tank didn't need a kitchen appliance strapped to its nose. Williams was 28 years old, a veteran of North Africa, zero experience with mine-clearing equipment that had been designed by a disgraced general the British Army had forced into retirement 3 years earlier. The beach ahead was Gold Beach, Sector Jig Green, 5 miles of sand that intelligence said was mined with 3,000 teller mines, S-mines, and improvised explosives. Behind Williams, 600 men from the 50th Infantry Division were waiting in landing craft, waiting for tanks to clear paths through the obstacles, through the mines, through the killing zone the Germans had spent 4 years preparing. Williams's tank was a Sherman Crab, one of General Percy Hobart's Funnies, specialized armored vehicles that conventional officers had mocked for 2 years. The chains on the front of the Crab were supposed to flail the ground at 140 RPM, detonating mines before the tank reached them. In training exercises, the system had worked, sometimes. Other times, the chains broke, or the drum jammed, or mines detonated too close and damaged the tank's tracks. But on Gold Beach that morning, Williams didn't have the luxury of doubt. The infantry needed paths. Without paths, they would walk into minefields. Without the crabs, hundreds of men would die before they reached the seawall. If you want to see how a retired general's insane mine-clearing contraption changed the outcome of D-Day, please hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories like this. And please subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Williams and the Crab. The landing craft ramp dropped at 6:31 a.m. Water rushed in. Williams engaged the tracks and drove forward into 3 feet of surf. The Sherman's waterproofing held. The engine kept running. Behind him, 3 more crabs followed, spacing themselves 30 yards apart. The beach was chaos, artillery shells exploding, machine gun fire from the German positions on the bluffs, smoke and spray obscuring visibility. Williams could see obstacles ahead, Belgian gates, Czech hedgehogs, wooden ramps tipped with teller mines. The crabs were supposed to deal with mines in the sand, not obstacles in the surf. That was the job of another one of Hobart's Funnies, the AVRE. Armored Vehicle Royal Engineers. Williams drove through the obstacles. The Sherman's weight crushed wooden structures. Metal obstacles scraped the hull but didn't stop forward movement. At 6:38 a.m., the Crab reached dry sand. Williams engaged the flail. The drum began rotating. The chains dropped and started beating the sand ahead of the tank. The sound was incredible. 43 chains hitting sand at 140 rotations per minute. Each impact created a small explosion of dirt and debris. Every few seconds, a louder explosion, a mine detonating under the chains. The system was working. Williams drove forward at 1.2 miles per hour. Any faster and the chains couldn't effectively detonate mines. Any slower and the infantry behind him would be pinned down longer under German fire. The Crab carved a path 9 feet wide through the minefield. Behind Williams, infantrymen followed in single file, staying within the cleared lane. At 6:47 a.m., one of the chains broke. The flail kept operating with 42 chains. At 6:52 a.m., another chain broke, 41 chains. The system was designed to function with up to 20% chain loss. Williams kept moving. By 7:15 a.m., Williams's Crab had cleared 200 yards of beach and reached the seawall. The path behind him was marked with white tape that engineers had laid down to show the cleared route. Infantry were pouring through. 0 casualties from mines in that lane. 3 more Crabs operated on Gold Beach that morning. By 8 a.m., they had cleared 4 paths through the minefields. The 50th Infantry Division advanced inland with minimal casualties from mines. Gold Beach was secure by 10:30 a.m. Compare this to Omaha Beach. The Americans had been offered Hobart's Funnies. General Omar Bradley had declined. He believed conventional tanks and naval bombardment would be sufficient. Omaha Beach had the same mine density as Gold Beach, approximately 3,000 mines across the landing zone. Without crabs to clear paths, American infantry walked into minefields. The casualties at Omaha were catastrophic. Over 2,000 men killed or wounded in the first hours. Some units suffered 90% casualties before reaching the seawall. The difference between Gold Beach and Omaha Beach was Hobart's Funnies. Specialized equipment that conventional officers had mocked as circus acts and kitchen appliances had saved hundreds of British lives and enabled a successful landing. But the story of how these vehicles came to exist starts 3 years earlier, with a disgraced general who had been forced into retirement and told his ideas about armored warfare were obsolete. Major General Percy Hobart was 58 years old in 1940 when the British Army relieved him of command. Hobart had spent his career advocating for innovative uses of tanks and armored vehicles. He believed tanks should operate independently, not as support for infantry. He believed in specialized vehicles for specific tasks: mine clearing, bridge laying, obstacle removal. He believed the next war would require adaptable equipment, not just variations of the same tank design. His superiors disagreed. They believed Hobart was difficult, unorthodox, too willing to challenge established doctrine. In 1940, they forced him into retirement. Hobart took a job with the Home Guard, training civilian volunteers to defend England against invasion. A man who had commanded armored divisions was now teaching shopkeepers how to use rifles. Then came Dunkirk. The British Army evacuated from France with almost none of its heavy equipment. Tanks, artillery, vehicles, all abandoned. Britain needed to rebuild its armored forces, and it needed experienced officers who understood tank warfare. Winston Churchill intervened personally. Churchill had followed Hobart's career and admired his unorthodox thinking. In October 1941, Churchill ordered the War Office to recall Hobart to active duty. The assignment: create and command a new armored division, the 79th Armored Division. The mission: develop specialized armored vehicles for the invasion of Europe that everyone knew was coming. Hobart assembled a team of engineers, tank designers, and combat veterans. They analyzed the problems that would face any amphibious invasion: beach obstacles, minefields, seawalls, flooded areas, fortified positions. Each problem required a specific solution. Conventional tanks could not solve all of these problems. Hobart's team began designing modifications. Take a Sherman tank and add a rotating drum with chains, you get a mine-clearing vehicle. Take a Churchill tank and mount a 290mm mortar, you get a bunker-busting weapon. Take a tank and replace the turret with a bridge, you get a mobile bridge layer that can cross anti-tank ditches. The designs were radical. Many of them looked absurd. A tank with chains flailing in front of it looked like an agricultural machine, not a weapon of war. A tank with a large drum that could lay reinforced matting over soft sand looked like a construction vehicle. A tank that could launch explosive charges at concrete fortifications looked like something from a science fiction novel. When Hobart presented these designs to senior officers, many responded with skepticism or outright mockery. One general called the Crab a carnival ride. Another said the AVR with its mortar looked like a drain pipe on tracks. The Churchill Crocodile, a flamethrower tank, was called Hobart's horror show, but Hobart had Churchill's backing, and he had a mandate to experiment. The 79th Armored Division became a testing ground for unconventional ideas. If a design didn't work, they modified it. If it still didn't work, they abandoned it and tried something else. By 1943, Hobart's team had developed over a dozen specialized vehicles, each one designed for a specific task in amphibious operations. The Sherman Crab was perhaps the most important of these designs, and it had the most troubled development history. Mine clearing had been a problem since World War I. Soldiers would crawl forward with bayonets or probes, carefully searching for buried explosives. The process was slow, dangerous, and resulted in heavy casualties. During World War II, the Germans had developed sophisticated mine-laying techniques. They mixed anti-personnel mines with anti-tank mines, creating layered defenses that killed infantry and destroyed vehicles. Early attempts at mechanical mine clearing involved rollers, heavy cylinders pushed in front of tanks. The rollers would detonate mines by pressure, but rollers were slow, and they couldn't detonate all mine types. Some mines required more pressure than rollers could provide. Other mines were too deep for rollers to reach. Hobart's engineers experimented with explosive methods, rockets that detonated mines with blast overpressure. This worked, but but required large amounts of explosives in multiple passes, not practical for beach landings where speed was critical. Then someone suggested chains. The idea came from a South African engineer named Abraham du Toit, who had seen agricultural flail machines used to thresh grain. What if you mounted a rotating drum with chains on the front of a tank? The chains would beat the ground with enough force to detonate mines. The rotating drum would keep the chains moving continuously, covering a wide path. Hobart's team built a prototype. They mounted a rotating drum on a Matilda tank and fitted it with chains. Initial tests were promising. The flail detonated mines consistently, but the system had problems. The chains wore out quickly. The drum mechanism jammed. Mines sometimes detonated too close to the tank and damaged the tracks or the flail assembly. The engineers made modifications. They strengthened the chains using hardened steel links. They improved the drum mounting system to reduce jamming. They adjusted the chain length and the rotation speed to optimize mine detonation while minimizing damage to the tank. By 1943, they had a working system mounted on Sherman tanks. The Sherman Crab could clear a path 9 feet wide at a speed of 1.2 miles per hour. But the Crab was just one of Hobart's funnies. The 79th Armored Division developed a whole family of specialized vehicles, the AVRE, Armored Vehicle Royal Engineers. A Churchill tank modified to carry a 209mm Petard mortar. The petard fired a 40-pound explosive charge called a flying dustbin. The charge could destroy concrete fortifications, bunkers, and heavy obstacles. The AVRE also carried fascine, large bundles of wood that could be dropped into ditches or craters to create crossings. The Churchill Crocodile, a flamethrower tank. The Crocodile towed an armored trailer filled with 400 gallons of flame fuel. The flamethrower could project burning liquid up to 120 yards, effective against bunkers and fortified positions where the occupants couldn't be reached by conventional weapons. The Churchill Avro with bobbin, a tank that carried a roll of reinforced matting. The matting could be laid over soft sand or mud to create a temporary road for wheeled vehicles and infantry, essential for beaches where vehicles would otherwise bog down. The DD tank, duplex drive, a Sherman tank fitted with a collapsible canvas screen and propellers. The screen provided flotation, allowing the tank to swim from landing craft to shore. Once on land, the screen would be dropped and the tank would fight as a conventional vehicle. Canal Defense Light, a tank with a powerful searchlight and strobe system designed to blind and disorient enemy defenders during night operations. Each of these vehicles looked strange. Each one violated conventional tank design principles, and each one solved a specific problem that would be encountered in amphibious operations. By early 1944, as planning for D-Day intensified, Allied commanders had to decide whether to use Hobart's funnies. The British were enthusiastic. General Bernard Montgomery had seen demonstrations and recognized the value of specialized equipment. The Canadians agreed to use the vehicles, but the Americans were skeptical. General Omar Bradley, commanding the American forces at Omaha Beach, was offered the full range of Hobart's funnies. Bradley declined most of them. He accepted the DD amphibious tanks, but rejected the Crabs, AVREs, and other specialized vehicles. Bradley believed American firepower and conventional tactics would be sufficient. He believed specialized equipment was a crutch that would make his troops dependent on gadgets rather than training and aggression. This decision would have consequences. On June 6, 1944, 5 beaches were assaulted in Normandy. The British landed at Gold and Sword beaches. The Canadians landed at Juno Beach. The Americans landed at Utah and Omaha beaches. At Gold Beach, the Crabs went in first at 6:30 a.m. Within 30 minutes, they had cleared 4 paths through the minefields. Infantry followed through the cleared lanes with minimal casualties. By mid-morning, Gold Beach was secure and troops were advancing inland. At Juno Beach, the Canadian forces used Crabs and AVREs. The Crabs cleared mines while the AVREs demolished concrete obstacles and fortifications. Despite rough seas and navigation errors that caused some units to land in the wrong sectors, the Canadians secured Juno Beach by noon with casualties lower than expected. At Sword Beach, British forces again used the full array of Hobart's funnies. Crabs cleared mines, AVRs destroyed bunkers, Churchill crocodiles burned out fortified positions. Sword Beach was secured by 9:00 a.m. At Omaha Beach, the Americans faced a disaster. Without crabs to clear mines, infantry advanced into minefields and suffered heavy casualties. Without AVRs to destroy fortifications, troops were pinned down under fire from concrete bunkers. The DD tanks that were supposed to provide fire support mostly sank in rough seas. By 8:30 a.m., the situation at Omaha was so desperate that commanders considered evacuating the beach. Only through extraordinary courage and improvisation did American forces eventually secure Omaha Beach. Engineers manually cleared paths through obstacles under fire. Destroyers moved close to shore to provide direct fire support against bunkers. Infantry assaulted fortified positions without armored support. By the end of D-Day, Omaha Beach was secure, but at a cost of over 2,000 casualties, more than double the casualties at any other beach. The difference was Hobart's Funnies. The British and Canadian beaches had specialized equipment that solved specific problems: mines, obstacles, fortifications. The American beach at Omaha relied on conventional tactics and paid a heavy price. After D-Day, American commanders quickly changed their position on specialized armored vehicles. Within weeks, American forces were requesting crabs and AVREs for their own operations. By the time Allied forces were fighting in Germany, American tank battalions included specialized vehicles based on Hobart's designs. The Sherman Crab alone cleared paths through thousands of minefields in France, Belgium, Holland, and Germany. The vehicles operated continuously from June 1944 until May 1945. Units equipped with crabs reported mine casualties reduced by 70% compared to units without mine-clearing equipment. The AVRE demolished fortifications across France and into Germany. The Tuna 90mm petard proved capable of destroying concrete bunkers that conventional tank guns couldn't penetrate. AVRs were particularly valuable in urban fighting, where fortified buildings had to be reduced one by one. The Churchill crocodile became one of the most feared weapons in the Allied arsenal. German troops would often surrender rather than face flamethrower tanks. The psychological impact of the crocodile was as important as its tactical effectiveness. But the success of Hobart's Funnies was not without cost. The specialized vehicles required specialized training. Crews had to learn not just how to operate tanks, but how to operate complex mechanical systems under combat conditions. The flail mechanism on the Crab was temperamental. Chains broke frequently and had to be replaced under fire. The AVRI's petard mortar had limited ammunition capacity, only 26 rounds. The Churchill crocodile's flame fuel was highly flammable, making the vehicle a death trap if penetrated by enemy fire. And the vehicles themselves were slow. The Crab could only advance at 1.2 miles per hour while flailing. The AVRE was based on the Churchill tank, which had a top speed of 15 miles per hour. These vehicles could not keep pace with advancing armored formations. They were specialized tools for specific tasks, not general-purpose combat vehicles. Yet despite these limitations, Hobart's Funnies proved that specialized equipment could solve problems that conventional tactics could not. The idea that different tasks required different tools seems obvious now, but in 1944 it was revolutionary. Military doctrine emphasized standardization. Every tank should be able to perform every task. Hobart proved that specialization was more effective than versatility. Percy Hobart was vindicated. The general, who had been forced into retirement and mocked for his unorthodox ideas, had created vehicles that saved thousands of lives and contributed directly to Allied victory in Europe. Churchill's decision to recall Hobart and give him freedom to experiment proved to be one of the most important personnel decisions of the war. But Hobart remained controversial. Even after D-Day demonstrated the value of specialized armored vehicles, some officers continued to view him as difficult and unorthodox. Hobart's management style was confrontational. He demanded perfection from his subordinates. He had no patience for bureaucratic obstacles or conventional thinking. He made enemies among senior officers who resented his direct access to Churchill and his willingness to bypass normal channels. After the war, Hobart retired again, this time permanently. He settled in Surrey and spent his remaining years writing about armored warfare and advocating for continued innovation in military equipment. He died on February 19, 1957, at age 71. The legacy of Hobart's Funnies extended far beyond World War II. The concept of specialized armored vehicles became standard in modern militaries. Today, every major army operates mine-clearing vehicles, bridge layers, engineering vehicles, and other specialized equipment descended from Hobart's designs. The U.S. Army's M1150 assault breacher vehicle is a direct descendant of the Sherman Crab. It uses a mine plow and line charges to clear paths through minefields. The British Army's Trojan is an armored engineering vehicle that performs many of the same tasks as the AVRE. Modern militaries have entire units dedicated to operating specialized equipment, something that didn't exist before Hobart's innovations. The Sherman Crab itself remained in service until the 1950s. The British Army used crabs in Korea for mine-clearing operations. Some were sold to other nations and served even longer. A few surviving examples are preserved in museums. The vehicle that Sergeant Jack Williams drove onto Gold Beach on June 6, 1944, no longer exists. It was likely scrapped after the war, along with thousands of other military vehicles that were no longer needed. But the idea behind the Crab, that specialized equipment designed for specific tasks could save lives and achieve objectives that conventional equipment could not, that idea survived and continues to influence military thinking today. The story of Hobart's Funnies is a story about innovation in the face of skepticism. It's about a disgraced general who refused to accept that his ideas were obsolete. It's about engineers who built vehicles that looked ridiculous but worked brilliantly. And it's about soldiers like Sergeant Jack Williams who trusted their lives to equipment that conventional wisdom said would fail. On Gold Beach, Juno Beach, and Sword Beach, that equipment worked. It cleared mines, destroyed obstacles, opened paths for infantry. It saved hundreds of lives and enabled successful landings that might otherwise have failed. On Omaha Beach, where conventional wisdom prevailed and specialized equipment was rejected, over 2,000 men died or were wounded in a few hours. The blood on Omaha Beach was the price of skepticism, the cost of believing that conventional methods were always sufficient. Hobart's Funnies proved that unconventional problems require unconventional solutions, that sometimes the right answer looks absurd until it's tested in combat. That innovation requires the courage to risk failure and the willingness to ignore critics who mock what they don't understand. The men who called the Crab a carnival ride were wrong. The officers who called the AVR a drainpipe on tracks were wrong. The generals who said specialized equipment was a crutch were wrong. And the soldiers who landed on the British and Canadian beaches on D-Day knew it, because they walked through cleared paths in minefields while their American counterparts at Omaha walked into carnage. Hobart's insane mine-clearing method wasn't insane. It was brilliant, and it opened Normandy. If this story struck a chord with you, do something small that makes a big difference. Tap that like button. Every like signals to YouTube that this history matters, and that more people should hear it. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications so you don't miss the next lost chapter we bring back to light. Every day, we uncover stories buried in old reports and fading records, tales of innovation, courage, and the refusal to accept that it can't be done. True history, true ingenuity. And now, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Are you tuning in from the UK, the United States, France, somewhere totally unexpected? Our community spans continents, and your voice is part of what keeps these stories alive. Share your city, share your country, even share if you or someone in your family served in engineering or armored units. Let us know you're here, keeping these memories from fading away. Thank you for watching, and thank you for helping ensure that the innovators and problem solvers of the past aren't forgotten. Because as long as we remember them, their courage to think differently continues to inspire.